In prison, I lived with a serial killer for 6 months before I ever knew he was a serial killer. So back in 2004, I was at Nottoway Correctional Center, and I'd gotten a job in the woodshop. So they were moving me to the woodshop workers pod. Remember, they popped the door to the cell for me to go in, and there was this little old man sitting in front of his TV drinking coffee, and I was like, bet, this is a roommate I can deal with. He's not young and crazy. He's not going to be loud. And it worked out great. Sometimes he worked night shift and I worked day shift, so I got the cell to myself. He was quiet. We had good conversations. We watched Jeopardy. I really liked the guy. He even taught me how to shave, because when I first got locked up, I couldn't grow a beard, so I never learned. And I felt so bad for him because he never got mail and never, talked on the phone, that I asked my stepmom if she would write him, because she had lived in Japan and he had been stationed in Japan. And then my stepmom comes for a visit, and she's like, Jesse, your roommate's a serial killer. And I was like, oh, okay. So she tells me this whole story, and I go back and I have to have this conversation. Like, Greg, remember how I said I was going to try to get my stepmom to write you? Well, she doesn't really feel comfortable. And he says, yeah, you did your homework. And he laughed, and it scared the shit out of me. Living with a Serial Killer Part 2. So when Greg said what he said and laughed, it scared the shit out of me. But I didn't have a lot of options. I could have put in a cell change request, but it would have taken days or weeks or months for somebody in that pod to get locked up or get transferred, and then I wouldn't have any choice in what cell I moved into. Not only that, he would have known the whole time that I was trying to get out of the cell with him, and that would almost make me more uncomfortable. Like, he knows I'm trying to get away. Is he going to take this personally? I could have gone to the hole. I could have requested for my own safety, but I was young and full of pride. I wasn't going to let an old man make me check in. That wasn't going to happen. Not only that, I had been in the cell with him for 6 months, and he'd never been anything but polite and helpful. So I just kind of adjusted. But it made me really uncomfortable. When he would look and smile at things on TV, I started wondering, is that a normal smile or is that a predator smile? And when he would tell me stories about, back in the Army, they taught us how to beat polygraph exams. And so it's what did this dude really do? What did he really think? It just completely blew my mind. And it was one of those crazy stories. And eventually he got transferred to the medical unit because he was old and infirm, and I never saw him again. Living with a Serial Killer, Part 3. Now, I just found out today that my mom still has a copy of Greg's military record. Before I found out Greg was a serial killer, I was trying to get him help because he was suffering from an inguinal hernia, which meant some of his intestines were sticking out the stomach wall, and if it strangulated, he would have died. And medical wasn't giving him a hernia belt, wouldn't give him surgery, wouldn't give him any kind of treatment. So I had my mom calling up and raising hell, and eventually she just sent a belt that they gave to him, which is against policy, but they weren't following policy anyways. So I had forgotten that they had this whole exchange. He had sent his medical records, he had sent his service records, he had sent all these things, and they had actually sent letters back and forth. So she said she still has letters from Greg the serial killer. So not only was I in the cell with him, my mom actually corresponded with him. Conversations with Greg the serial killer. So I did not like talking to him about the things that he had done or had been accused of doing, because he would get this kind of faraway look in his eyes, and he would smile, this creepy Joker smile, and it just made me incredibly uncomfortable. But he taught me some other things. He improved my vocabulary tremendously. He would give me homework. He would correct the things that I was saying because I was an ignorant kid. I remember he could recite the names of everybody he had lost in Vietnam, and it was this really long list, and he would do it at least once a week. It was like a kind of a religious thing for him. Remember, he taught me about leadership. He never raised his voice and he never cursed because he said he always wanted to have a trump card. So if he and his guys were out on patrol and he needed them to know it was serious, he would raise his voice or he would cuss. That's something that I really live by. I think that there's a really valuable lesson there. And it was just generally the kind of experience and the ideas, but it was also, shrouded in deception because there were obviously a lot of lies that he told me or a lot of incomplete truths. So I don't really know what to make of him. It was just a complex, confusing guy. Early on in prison, I had a really good roommate who taught me a lot. It just later turned out that he was a serial killer, but one of the things he taught me was to never raise my voice and never swear, so that if I ever had to raise my voice or ever had to swear, it would carry weight. To not be empty and full of bluster, but to save that for a time that it really mattered. Life lessons from Greg the serial killer. So when he was in Vietnam, he would make everyone in his unit shave every morning and take a nip of liquor every night because he said it's important to have a sense of normalcy. That no matter how bad the insanity or how bad the chaos, we have to make it somehow comprehensible by putting borders on the beginning and the end of each day. More life lessons from Greg the serial killer. So he said, even more important than the way you speak or the way you dress is the way you hold yourself, because your posture will inform other people's of your ability and your confidence, but also good posture will improve the way you feel about your own abilities and confidence.